This person was running away, not from relationships, but from the idea of losing their own center. They said they didn't want to get tied down, but inside, there was a panic of disappearing into someone else, because every time they tried to get closer, someone mistook affection for possession, surrender for submission, love for control, until someone different came along. Someone who didn't want to shape or rush them, someone who simply stayed present, silent, attentive, and this person felt strange, because for the first time there was no pressure, there was no rush, there was no intrusion, and then something gave way. Not everything, but enough to stop running away. This person began to feel peace, in the simple gestures, in the respectful timing, in the absence of emotional blackmail. They started to realize that the fear of commitment was never about the other person. It was about not being seen, about being silenced, about losing their own voice. But this time, this person didn't need to scream to be heard, nor hide to be respected. And then they understood. It wasn't the commitment that imprisoned them. It was insecurity. It was the past. It was the fear of repeating an unhealed pain. But when there's genuine emotional safety, committing becomes a choice, not an obligation, and freedom feels natural. This person didn't want cages. They wanted peace. They wanted to just be, and they found it. If this ever happened to you, comment, "I needed to hear this," or just write, "It happened to me." This person was running away. They even ran from thinking about what it meant to stay. It wasn't exactly about relationships. It was about what was lost within them, or rather what this person learned to believe they would always lose: autonomy, space, voice, calm. Since early on, this person heard that to love was to let go, that to love was to sacrifice, that those who truly loved stopped being a priority, stopped saying no, stopped existing as they were. And this was recorded. It became tattooed invisibly, in a corner of the soul that no one could see, but that shaped everything. Every time someone said, "I want to be with you," that person didn't hear an invitation. They heard a sentence, a demand disguised as affection, a promise that sounded like a threat, because deep down, the fear wasn't of loving. It was of dissolving within love, of becoming an extension of the other, of no longer seeing oneself as the center of their own life. And that's why this person protected themselves. They anticipated. They distanced themselves even before getting close. They did this in silence, like someone who already knows it's going to go wrong, like someone who doesn't believe it can be different, until someone appeared, without noise, without urgency. "No, you're mine. No, prove it to me. No, stay with me." Just presence. And this person was taken aback, very much, because what had come before was always full of expectation, full of questions disguised as care, full of vigilance dressed up as concern. But now it was different. This person could disappear for a while, and there was no demand. They could say what they thought, and there was no correction. They could feel fear, and there was no judgment. And there something new began, something nameless, something that didn't shout but anchored. At first, this person tested. They tested time. They tested silence. They even tested the limits, waiting for the other side to explode, waiting for the mask to fall, waiting for everything to turn into what it always had. But it didn't turn. And then, the realization began to sink in, slowly, without euphoria, without climax. A slow but firm recognition. Maybe it wasn't love that suffocated. Maybe it was the way they had always been taught to love. This person realized that when emotional security exists, there's no need for control, no manipulation from fear of losing, no scarcity games to force attention. And this dismantles, disarms, undresses, because when someone sustains their own affection without demanding anything in return, it's almost impossible to keep pretending that they don't feel. This person began to realize something else, that real love doesn't break down the door. It doesn't come with a puffed-up chest or fiery promises. It arrives where fear still screams, but finds space to be heard. For the first time, this person didn't feel the need to hide their wounds to be accepted. They didn't have to pretend to be secure to avoid being left behind. They didn't need to become an ideal to fit into anyone's gaze. And there, a new freedom was born. Not that empty freedom of those who flee. Not the freedom of "I don't want to be tied down," but the freedom to remain who they are, even alongside someone, even in a bond, even in surrender. And then, this person discovered something that no one had told them. That true commitment doesn't bind. It embraces, it supports, it expands. But this discovery didn't come with fireworks. It came with the simple, a night in silence, a steady gaze, a weightless hug, a day when explanations weren't necessary. It was palpable, palpable in the body that relaxes, in the mind that slows down, in the anxiety that eases, in the internal space that no longer needs to hide behind emotional walls. And the deepest realization, this person began to see themselves out of fear, out of defensiveness, out of armor. They realized they have their own desires. They realized they have boundaries. They realized they can say no and still be loved, still be chosen, still hold a place in someone's heart, because now it was no longer about pleasing to avoid being left. Now it was about existing fully and allowing the other to exist as well. This person understood that commitment is not fusion, it's connection, it's not control, it's trust, it's not captivity, it's ground. But none of this would have been possible if the other side hadn't done things differently, if they hadn't stopped repeating the pattern, if they hadn't chosen to not dominate but to be present. And for this reason, this person stayed. Not because they were convinced, but because they felt free, free to breathe, free to feel, free to turn back if she wanted to, free to stay if it were true. And she stayed, not as someone who surrenders, but as one who chooses, with awareness, with intention, with peace. This person realized she didn't need to escape the depths. She just needed someone who knew how to swim in them, without drowning, without overwhelming. Because what hurts the most isn't loving. It's loving alone. It's loving insecurely. It's loving with fear. And now, she is no longer afraid. If you've lived this, comment, "I needed to hear this," or just write, "It happened to me." You don't need to explain yourself. But if it hasn't happened yet, notice the patterns that still make you hold back. Notice the types of presence you've normalized. Notice if you've learned to confuse comfort with control. Maybe what holds you back isn't the other person. It's what you still believe about love, and maybe it's time to make space for a love that doesn't weigh you down. That doesn't measure. That doesn't demand. That simply stays. Are you feeling this too? Have you ever wanted to run away but ended up staying? Tell me about it. Or just breathe, feel. Come back here whenever you want to read again. The truth is that this person still feels fear. Not the paralyzing, desperate kind, but a quiet fear, disguised as caution, hidden in the lines of her routine, in the long pauses before responding, in the silences where there shouldn't be any silence at all. Because even after realizing she could be loved without disappearing, her body still carries old memories. And memories take longer than decisions to dissolve. This person learned not to trust the first kind gesture, learned to be suspicious of compliments, learned to always prepare for an end, even at the beginning, even in the middle, even when everything is fine. That's why, even when she has chosen to stay, there are parts of her that still test, that still hesitate, that still pull back even when they want to move forward. But now something is different. Now this person perceives. She perceives what she feels. She perceives what she repeats. She realizes what still holds her back, even when she wants to let go. And just that awareness changes everything. Because when feelings come with consciousness, they don't control. They reveal. And this person started to unveil parts of herself that she didn't even know existed. New desires, forgotten boundaries, expressions of affection that once seemed silly, vulnerabilities she swore she would never show. And each time she reveals a little more, something inside her takes a deeper breath, as if saying, "This is it. Now you're here." This person, once full of strategies to avoid getting involved, now begins to create spaces of intimacy she has never experienced. She no longer needs to flee to protect herself. She no longer needs to harden to be respected. She no longer needs to pretend she doesn't care. She cares a lot. But now she cares about what truly matters, her own peace, her own voice, her own emotional sanity. And that changes everything. Because this person realized that suffocating love is not love. It's attachment, it's scarcity, it's trauma repeated in the form of a relationship. But the love that sustains, that is indeed rare. That is indeed dangerous, not because it hurts, but because it heals. And healing is scary for someone who has spent a lifetime on alert. Healing means trusting, letting go, stopping the constant watch over the other, stopping the waiting for an attack that may never come. Healing is returning to oneself, returning to feel, returning to be present. And presence, that is the word that changes everything for this person. Because she realized that what she truly needed was not overwhelming passion nor eternal promises. It was presence. Someone who would stay, not just in body, but in gaze, in gesture, in time, in respect. And when she found this presence, everything that seemed impossible became perceptible. Everything she swore she could never live started to happen, in a simple way, without 1,000 plans, without pressure. This person didn't want someone to solve her life. She wanted someone who would see her, even when she hid from herself. And that's what she found. Without asking, without planning, without begging. Now she knows, emotional safety is not a luxury. It's a foundation. It's what sustains real love. Not a perfect love, but a love that can be felt, breathable, possible. This person no longer needs promises. She needs continuity, truth, someone who knows how to stay, even when the other isn't having their best day, even when there's silence, even when there's fear. And now she is that person. She has become what she was searching for. She has turned into what she always wanted to receive. Because when you find a love like this, it's impossible not to transform. It's impossible to keep living small, pretending it's okay to accept emotional crumbs, faking that everything is fine when nothing is. This person now recognizes the difference. And when we recognize, it becomes impossible to go back to what hurt us, even if it's easier, even if it's more familiar. She no longer wants ease. She wants depth. She wants exchange. She wants presence. She wants peace. And if it's to love, let it be light, but not shallow. If it's to stay, let it be with commitment, but without losing oneself. If it's to build, let it be with truth, even when it hurts, even when it's hard. Because now this person is no longer afraid of love. Her fear is of betraying herself, of ignoring what she feels, of pretending that everything is fine just to keep someone close. She has done that too many times, and now she knows the cost. Now she chooses differently. Not because she learned the right formula, but because finally she realized who she is. And those who recognize themselves never accept being half. They never settle for almost. They never allow themselves to shrink to fit into a small space. This person is now whole, not perfect, not ready, but whole. And whole, she can love, for real, without fear, without burden, without escape. If you felt this too, right? I know what it's like to find yourself amidst the chaos and choose calm, or just comment, heart. But if it's still hard, stay here a little longer. Read again, sit down, and realize, now, what surprises this person most is not the pain they once felt. It's the calm that has begun to inhabit a space that was once filled with tension. It's strange to notice this, to realize that the place once consumed by anguish is now a home of silence, of presence, of a deeper breath, without the weight of self-protection all the time. This person no longer lives in a state of war. They don't measure their words out of fear of losing someone. They don't tiptoe around in relationships. And this changes absolutely everything, because those who live on the defensive do not love, they survive. And now this person wants more than just to survive. They want to feel without measuring, without controlling, without expecting the worst. They no longer want to read between the lines to defend themselves. They want to hear what is said, trust what is felt, and support what they themselves offer, not as someone who sacrifices, but as someone who recognizes they are ready to nurture what matters. This person doesn't want any more drama, but they also don't want lukewarm relationships. They want intensity with ease, depth without heaviness, presence without confinement. And this requires a new type of presence, more lucid, sharper, more aware. They've started to realize that healthy love is, in fact, very simple, but it demands sacrifices that few are willing to make. Sacrifices of control, of manipulation, of emotional games, of defensive postures that only push people away. And above all, sacrifices of the illusion that someone else will fill their own emptiness. This person understood, perhaps for the first time, that it's not fair to ask someone to support an internal structure that they themselves have never sustained. So they began to take care of that. They started to build security within. They began to not depend on immediate responses to feel loved. They started to respect their own cycles without forcing themselves to keep someone close. They even began to say no, with firmness, without anger, without fear of losing. Because when the right person meets a version of you that respects itself, she doesn't back down. She acknowledges she stays, and if she doesn't stay, she's not the right person. And that's okay. This person now knows. Those who can't handle your freedom wouldn't be able to handle your commitment either. And the most liberating part of all this is that now she doesn't force what doesn't flow. She doesn't beg for reciprocity. She doesn't chase after those who disappear. She doesn't dramatize other people's silence. She observes and decides. Because those who are aware of themselves no longer need to beg to be seen. This person now lives in a different emotional space. And no, it's not because she stopped feeling pain. It's because she stopped resisting what she feels. She allows. She feels. She observes. She doesn't sabotage herself out of fear of losing someone, because she has already understood. There's nothing more desperate than losing herself, and she has lived that. Too much. Too many times she molded herself to fit. Too many times she accepted less. Too many times she silenced her inner screams to maintain outward appearances. Now, not anymore. This person today lives a new commitment to herself, a commitment that demands nothing but truth, nothing but presence, nothing but continuity, continuing to be who she is even when it's uncomfortable, continuing to choose peace even when it's tempting to give in to chaos, continuing to recognize her own worth even when the world tries to convince her that she's not enough. And the most beautiful part is that without needing to force anything, this new internal state began to reflect outward. Lighter relationships, clearer connections, sincere conversations, and a solitude that doesn't weigh her down because it's not absence, it's clarity. This person today looks back with tenderness, with compassion, but doesn't want to go back. She no longer wants that kind of bond where she has to disappear to be accepted. She no longer wants to walk on shards to maintain an illusion of love. She wants firmness. She wants care. She wants conscious commitment. And you know what's even deeper? She doesn't blame herself anymore for taking so long to realize all of this, because she knows that every fall, every repetition, every confusing night, every contained despair, every swallowed cry was part of the journey. And now, on this side, she can finally rest, without losing her clarity, but without carrying the weight of a past that no longer defines her. This person today chooses where to step, chooses who to stay with, chooses when to be silent and when to speak, chooses what deserves to continue, and above all chooses not to return to old versions of herself just to maintain fragile connections, because now she has realized the strength of living her own truth without the fear of being left behind. And if she is left, she knows she doesn't lose. She sets herself free. If this has made sense to you so far, right, now I understand what it means not to lose oneself for love, or just stay silent, because sometimes silence is also an answer. If it resonated with you, comment on the topic, share, and subscribe to the channel.